how to write a great personal statement. Your personal statement is your main essay, and it gets sent to all the different colleges that you apply to. And it's really an important part of your application, particularly when you're applying to top tier universities. And it's important because while your transcript describes what you are, your personal statement describes who you are, right? Your transcript talks about how good you are as a student and what you're involved in, and where you shine as a scholar. But your personal statement talks to who you are inside. What are your core values? What are you curious about? What type of person you are? And with so many highly qualified applicants applying to top tier universities, they're not just looking for good students. They're looking for students who they really want to have on campus. You know, which students are going to add value to class? Which students are eternally curious about the world? Which students are going to help other students in their dorm and on campus? So your personal statement really gives them a chance to see who you are inside. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 keys for writing a great personal statement, starting with number 1, which is the most important one, and that's tell a good story. Students never know what they should write about in their personal statement, but the easiest and the most effective thing to do is just write a story about yourself. Talk about a time in your life, ideally in the last few years when you were still in high school, when something happened that changed you and forced you to grow as a person. And the reason this is such a powerful way to go is that with any kind of story, you need to have change. You need the character at the beginning to be different from the character at the end. And if you think about your favorite movies, if a character doesn't change from the beginning of the movie until the end, it's not very satisfying. And it's the same thing with any kind of story about yourself. You really want to make sure that your essay has a clear beginning, middle, and an end. In the beginning, I was like this, right? That's the first paragraph or 2. And then something happened. You know, I went overseas and had an experience, or I faced an obstacle that I didn't expect, or I was challenged to do something outside of my comfort zone. Whatever it is, I was forced to grow and evolve and change. And that's the meat of your story, how you wrestled with obstacles and how you learned to overcome them. And then in the end, you wrap up by showing who you are now as a person and how you're different from the person you were in the beginning. And this simple formula for telling a story about yourself is really powerful because you don't have to tell the reader who you are. Oh, I'm fascinated by math, or I'm a really compassionate person, or I'm a hard worker. You should never have to tell the person who you are. You should show them who you are through the story, right? And so when you think about what to write about, think about a story that challenged you to grow and that ended up revealing some of the best values you have or the best characteristics you have. And so just by telling that story, A, B, and then C, it will reveal to the reader these important things about you, that you're hardworking, that you're compassionate, that you're curious about the world, right? And so if you end up having to tell the reader, then it's probably not the best story. The second key is to be specific. A trap that a lot of students fall into when they're writing their personal statement is they just talk in broad generalities. Maybe they think that the details of the experience aren't interesting or aren't important, but they're everything. And as reference, I like to remind students about the movie Rocky, the first Rocky movie, which is, one of the most beloved movies of all time. And when you think about that movie, nothing really exciting happens. There's no car chases, right? There's no bombs going off. There's not a lot of crazy stuff. And in fact, the movie actually looks more like a stage play than a movie. It's just a couple of characters and their story. But the reason that movie is so effective, and the reason that your essay should be like that, is because it's very specifically about these very specific people in this very specific place and time. And you get invested in them, and you get invested in seeing them through and how they're going to end up at the end. And it's the same thing with your personal statement. You don't want to leave out important details. You want to talk about where you were and how you thought and what it was like around you. And I don't mean needless details like the sun was shining or it was 32 degrees, or you don't need those kind of details. More details that are relevant to the story about the challenge you faced or what you had to do to overcome it. Don't skip steps. The steps are the meat of the story, and that's what makes it personal to you. And students always wonder, well, how can I tell an essay that helps me stand apart from other people? I haven't done anything remarkable. What makes it personal to you and what makes it specific to you are those details. No one else is going to have that exact same story. So the more you can root your story in those specific details, the more powerful it will be. A third key is to start your essay and end your essay with a bang. And what this means is that your first line of the essay should grab the reader's attention. Don't just expect that because your reader has to read your essay that you can just take your sweet old time and get into the story. You know, these admissions officers, they're people and they're reading thousands upon thousands of essays. And if they're not invested in your essay by the first few sentences, it's very easy for them to kind of lose interest and drift off. And maybe they won't even finish reading the essay. So you really need to think about coming out with a bang. You know, what can I say to really grab their attention and let them know that this essay is going to be different? And you also want to end on a high note as well. What a lot of students do is their story kind of runs out of steam and they end up spending the last paragraph just kind of recapping what they said before. And that's the kiss of death. Your reader just read this story. They do not need a recap. It's fresh in their mind. You want your third act or that last paragraph to go in a new direction. What's something new that you can say? What's something surprising? You know, maybe it's a last minute change that happened to you, or maybe it's how you intend to apply what you learned to a future career that you never would have expected when you started out. Make sure that that last part has some heft to it and doesn't just trail off. A fourth key is to make it personal. This is not an academic paper. This is not an academic statement. It's called a personal statement for a reason. They really want to get a sense of who you are, of what your personality is. So this is an opportunity to let your personality shine. When you're writing it, you don't want to think that you're writing a paper for history class or English class. You want to kind of infuse it with some of your personality. If you have a quirky way of speaking, if there's certain phrases that you use in your everyday life, if you have a unique way of looking at the world, put all of that stuff into it. You have to remember that these officers are reading tens of thousands of essays, and believe me, they all start to sound the same after a while. And if you've ever experimented with ChatGPT or any kind of AI and asked them to write a version of an essay for you, you'll see very quickly that all these essays sound the same. They're all very impersonal. Everything they talk about sounds like a cliche. And you want to do everything you can to avoid that by making it personal to you. Don't speak in cliches. Don't speak in generalities. Try to make it so that if one of your friends or one of your teachers read this essay, they would say, oh, I think I know who wrote this paper. I can just kind of tell the personality. That's how it should come across. And the final key is to swing for the fences. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is a term that comes from baseball, which means to go for it. This is not a time to play it safe. Your personal statement is your one opportunity to stand out from the competition. Think of it like there are 100 qualified students who are all vying for that one last spot at your favorite university. And the difference maker is going to be the personal statement. If you just kind of phone it in with an essay that's okay or kind of weak or safe, it's not going to separate you from all these other students. It's not going to differentiate you. You really want your essay to say to the admissions committee, I'm not like all those other students. Like, I'm built a little different. I have a different gear. I approach life a little differently. And that's refreshing to them. You know, you don't need to prove that you're like, I'm just a typical average student. Like, your transcript will convey what kind of student you are, right? Your essay needs to show how you're exciting, how you're someone who's compelling and interesting or endearing, how you're someone who the admissions committee really wants to have on campus because they're excited to have you there. So when I say swing for the fences, I mean, take some risks with the story you tell or the way you tell the story. You know, the biggest mistake you can make is sounding like everyone else and blending in with the crowd. It's not that you went too far and did something too different. So this is really your opportunity to stand out, differentiate yourself, and win them over.